wind doesn't blow in Antarctica. It detonates. On this particular night, it came with no warning. One moment, silence. The next, the walls of the research hut were bending inward like cardboard, and the temperature outside had dropped to minus 60 degrees Celsius. Inside, a single man sat on the floor with his back against the generator casing, the only warm surface left, and listened to the structure around him scream. His name was Daniel Marsh, 44 years old, mechanical systems engineer, father of one. He had 3 days of food left. The radio had been dead for 11 days. The emergency beacon had gone silent after a battery failure he couldn't repair. Outside, visibility was 0. The storm had already lasted 36 hours, and there was no sign it was slowing. He pulled his knees to his chest, looked at the ceiling, and whispered something to no one. "If I don't make it through this night, no one will ever know." He sat there in the dark, breathing slowly, waiting for a wall to give way, and this was only month 3. Here is how he ended up alone at the bottom of the world. Daniel Marsh did not grow up dreaming of Antarctica. He grew up in rural Ohio, the son of a mechanic, a man who believed that if something was broken, you fixed it. That philosophy carried Daniel through engineering school, through 15 years of industrial field work, and eventually onto the radar of a private polar research consortium contracted by a European climate organization. The mission was straightforward on paper. A team of 7 would spend 4 months at a remote monitoring station on the Ross Ice Shelf, maintaining equipment, collecting atmospheric data, and servicing the mechanical infrastructure that kept the station alive. Daniel was the team's systems engineer. He kept the generators running. He kept the heat on. Without him, the station was just an expensive metal box, slowly being swallowed by ice. Before he left, his daughter, 9 years old, quiet, impossibly perceptive, drew him a picture. A man in a red coat standing in the snow, with a yellow sun above him, and beneath it in careful crayon letters, "Come home, Dad." He folded that drawing and put it in the inside pocket of his thermal jacket. He told her he would be back before her school. Play in the spring. He boarded the ship in October. Antarctica received him the way it receives everyone, indifferently, brutally, with a silence so complete it felt like the earth itself had stopped breathing. The continent is 4 times the size of Australia. It holds 90% of the world's fresh water locked inside ice sheets 2 miles thick in places. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was measured here. Early expeditions lost men not in dramatic moments but in quiet ones, to frostbite that set in before they noticed, to storms that materialized in minutes, to the particular madness that comes from too much darkness and too much silence. Daniel knew the history. He respected the place. He did not, for even one moment, believe it would happen to him. That belief held for exactly 51 days. It was a Tuesday in late November when the situation unraveled. One of the team members, a Norwegian glaciologist named Eric, suffered a medical emergency, a cardiac event, sudden and severe. He needed evacuation within hours. The team had a window. The resupply ship was 3 days out, but a medical aircraft could reach them in 6 hours if the weather cooperated. The weather cooperated. The plane landed. Eric was stabilized and loaded. Then the second emergency arrived. A storm system, faster and larger than any forecast had predicted, was closing in from the southwest. The pilot had 40 minutes before the window closed entirely. The aircraft could carry 6 people comfortably. There were 7 on the team, plus medical equipment and a stretcher that consumed additional space and weight. Someone had to stay. It was supposed to be 48 hours. The storm would pass, another aircraft would come, and Daniel would be back on the ship before the week was out. It was the logical choice. The station couldn't be left without its systems engineer in the event of a mechanical failure. And Daniel knew every pipe, every circuit, every pressure valve in that building. He said, without hesitation, "I'll stay." He watched the plane disappear into white sky. 40-8 hours passed. Then 72. The storm didn't break. It deepened. A second front merged with the first. Then the radio began cutting out, intermittent at first. Then gone entirely, a component failure Daniel diagnosed, but could not repair without parts. He didn't have. The rescue window kept closing. Weeks passed. Then a month. Logistics complications. Another storm. Budget approvals for a dedicated rescue flight. Bureaucracy moving slowly while a man moved slowly toward the edge. It was somewhere in the middle of December when Daniel stopped expecting rescue by any particular date. That's when he realized he wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. He was surviving. The first 2 months were almost manageable. He had enough food for 3 months if he was disciplined, and Daniel Marsh was a disciplined man. He created a rationing system and stuck to it. He established a daily routine, maintenance checks at 07:00, physical exercise at 1000, meals at fixed times, equipment logs in the evening. Routine, he understood instinctively, was armor. The generators held. The heat held. He repaired a water filtration issue with improvised materials. He felt in those early weeks a quiet pride. He was handling it. He talked to his daughter's drawing. Not constantly. Just sometimes in the evening when the silence pressed in too hard. "Still here," he would say. "Still working on it." But then January turned to February, and February brought the polar night. There is no adequate preparation for what happens to a human mind in 24-hour darkness. It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps. The days grow shorter and shorter until one morning you wake up and the sun never rises. And then it doesn't rise the next day. And then you understand with a deep physical certainty that it is not coming back for months. The darkness isn't peaceful. It has texture. It has weight. It presses against the windows and seeps under the door and sits in the corners of rooms. Daniel's sleep fractured completely by week 3 of polar night. He would sleep 4 hours, wake at what his watch said was 3 a.m., and be unable to distinguish that from noon. He began seeing things at the edges of his vision, movement that wasn't there, shapes that dissolved when he looked directly at them. He knew what they were: sleep deprivation, isolation, sensory monotony. Knowing didn't make them stop. He started talking to himself out loud, not to his daughter's drawing, but just into the room, narrating his actions as he performed them, checking the pressure gauge. Reading as normal. Good. That's good. The sound of his own voice was the only confirmation that he was real. He stopped writing in his log for 9 days. When he picked it up again, the entry read, "I don't know what day it is. I don't know who I'm writing this for." Then came the night he walked outside. He doesn't know, even now, why he went out without full preparation. Perhaps a noise. Perhaps simple impulse. He made it 15 feet from the door before a gust hit him sideways. He lost his footing on the ice and he went down hard. The cold was immediate and absolute, like being submerged in something solid. He lay there for a moment that felt very long, and he thought about not getting up. He thought about it seriously. And then, from somewhere he cannot fully explain, he got up. Month 5 brought a new category of danger. The physical. Frostbite had touched 3 fingers on his left hand during the fall outside. They healed partially, but the sensitivity never came back entirely. His body weight had dropped significantly, he estimated, 15 to 18 kilograms, and physical. Exertion that would have been trivial before now cost him. Seriously, then the fuel situation became critical. The main generator's fuel reserve, which he had been rationing carefully, was running lower than his calculations had projected. A slow leak he hadn't detected had been bleeding fuel for weeks. At current consumption, he had less than 30 days of heat remaining. There was an auxiliary storage unit 3 kilometers north, a small supply cache left from an earlier expedition, marked on the station's records. He had never needed to reach it. Now he had no choice. He prepared for 2 full days. Layering, navigation, emergency protocols. He left in the brief window of dim twilight that passed for midday, moving through terrain that looked identical in every direction. Using a compass and a rope line he unreeled behind him, he found the cache. The fuel drums were old but intact. He was loading his sled when the ice gave way beneath his left foot. Without any warning, a concealed crevasse. Narrow but deep, and he dropped to his armpit before the sled caught and held him. He hung there for a long moment. One arm over the sled, one leg dangling into black nothing, and listened to the sound of ice fragments falling into the dark below him. He got out, slowly, carefully. He loaded the fuel. He walked the 3 kilometers back. He didn't write about it in his log until the following day. All he wrote was, "Not today." Month 7. The rescue had been attempted twice. He didn't know this. He knew nothing. What he knew was that the food was almost gone, that he was thin in a way that frightened him when he caught his reflection in the station window, and that his body had begun doing things he couldn't fully control. Tremors, sudden waves of exhaustion, a persistent ringing in his left ear. He stopped marking the days on the wall. There is a particular stage of extreme isolation,